So yet again this week, somebody else has made the comment that why can't Spanish be easy like English? First of all, I would like to explain that English is not at all easy. Spanish is far easier to learn than English. And a lot of people say, oh no, you say everything back to front. I would like to be clear that we do not say everything back to front, which is right for coming from a country that drives on the wrong side of their road. Everybody has 3 pins in their plugs over there, where mostbody in the world has 2. So we know we do not do everything back to front. We have 5 things in our entire language that we say back to front compared with yours. There are 5 subjects which I explain to all of my students very soon that you have to say back to front. Like you all know that in Spanish, when you say red wine, you don't say red wine, you say vino tinto. You put the object first before you describe it. So we say vino tinto, wine red. Yes, we say that back to front to you guys. I think our way is better than yours to say what you're talking about first rather than describing it. But, you know, who am I to argue? But people say to me, oh no, Spanish is so hard to pronounce. No, it's not. Not at all. Just because you guys don't know how to roll your R's and say perro, fine. But English, I believe it is truly impossible to learn how to read in English. Your names of your towns. Now, come on, Worcestershire. You're meant to read that Worcester and Gloucester. Come on, please. And your verbs, people go, oh, the Spanish verbs, you've got all of these different endings. Yes, but at least we've got a pattern. At least we have a very simple pattern in Spanish to our verbs, which comes from Latin. Whereas in English, all right, you say that to put your verbs in the past, in English you put ed on the end of it for the past, which is all very fine with paint, painted, work, worked. But then you've got 200 exceptions. And may I point out ones like read, which in the past is read, spelt read. Come on, folks, how are you meant to work that out? And you've got hundreds of words in English that are impossible to work out. W-I-N-D. W-I-N-D. Wind? No, wind. Wind. How are you meant to know? In context, it's impossible. Spanish, we have a rule, and when we have a rule, that's how it works. People say, oh, the G. Sometimes in Spanish, your G is a throat sound. Sometimes your G is a normal G. Yeah, it's very simple. When the G is followed by an E or an I, it's a throat sound. End of story. Any exceptions to that? None at all. Zero. My mother would tell me little things about English. My mum, I remember her saying to me, I before E except after C. And I thought, a rule. It doesn't work. You've got loads of exceptions to that. And I hear them all the time from English people when I was trying to learn English, and they would say to me, why, when I would ask the question, why is it an apple but it's a dog? And people would say to me, oh, it's because you say an when it starts with a vowel, like an umbrella. And I went, oh, a rule. A rule. Great. So an umbrella, another word with a vowel, would be uniform. An uniform. No, it's not, is it? It's not, because your rules are absolutely rubbish, aren't they? Come on, they really are. Whereas in Spanish, they are very, very simple rules. And that's why it's very easy to learn Spanish, because once you abide by the rules, that's it, you're done. There are 5 things we say differently to you guys. I'm putting my hand up. But it is a much simpler language than English. That, all right, English for poetry is fantastic. You have so many words to describe things. Spanish don't believe me. When they say to me, I'm afraid, when I translate the Spanish for I'm afraid and it comes out in English as I'm afraid, they say, well, what's the difference between I'm afraid, I'm scared, or I'm frightened? And I go, nothing. And they go, there must be a difference, James. You wouldn't have I'm afraid, I'm scared, I'm frightened, 3 totally different ways of saying something if there wasn't a difference. And I go, no difference at all. Well, why do you have 3? Because we just annoy other countries by having that many ways. So what you've got to understand is that in Spanish we have 88,000 words, okay? 88,000 in-use words now. English language has 350,000 words in use now. 88,000 in Spanish, 350,000 in English. You know, that's not 2 or 3 times as many. That's a heck of a lot more. This is why in Spanish we have loads of words that just do not have a translation into English, or vice versa, because you've got more than 3 times as many as us. So there's bound to be a lot of words that we have to have one word that means all of them. You know, the verb robar, to rob, to steal, to burgle, to break into. The Spanish say, what's the difference between my house has been robbed and my house has been burgled? I say, well, burgled is only when it's the house. You know, somebody can be robbed, but the house is what gets burgled. You know, and they go, why don't you just say my house has been robado, has been robbed? It's much easier, isn't it? Much simpler. You have far more words than us, and it is a much more complicated language than ours. That's why I say anybody with a fairly decent memory can learn Spanish very, very quickly, because it's a very simple language to read, to write, to spell, and to speak. People say, oh yes, but when the Spanish speak, they speak so much quicker. Don't you think you guys speak quickly when you're speaking in English, and then you go to England and half of the words are left out? There's a certain part of England where they sound like they're on a mobile phone that's got no signal. Going up to pub wit wad foot pint wit dog, what's that meant to be, for goodness sake? All right, in Spain, when we talk quickly, we join up all the words and there are no gaps, but we don't leave out half of the blooming sentence. You know, Spanish is very, very simple, and don't say, I wish it was easy like English, because that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because English is not easy at all. It's incredibly complicated, your spelling, your amount of words, and that's without going into the thousands of expressions that you have in English, like that's not neither here nor there. And they go, well, where is it then, if it's not here nor there? You know, you wouldn't say to a Spaniard, no, es aquí o ahí. You know, they go, what? It's neither here nor there. You know, do you know it off the top of your head? I don't know it off the top of my head. If you said to a Spaniard, de arriba de mi cabeza, they'd think you're mental, you know. So you have way, way more expressions. So please don't go around saying, I wish it was easy like English, because Spanish is much, much easier to learn. You know, there are a couple of rules. Learn the rules, because that's why there are rules. Don't complain about the verbs when you have 200 irregulars in English. We have a rule. All right, we have a handful of irregulars, but we don't have 200. The past of cut, which is cut, exactly the same. It's not cutted, but the past of read, which is read, begin, began, begun, sweep, swept, swept. Good God, and you have to learn all of these. Luckily for you guys, you learnt them as you were children, and a child's brain is like a sponge and retains everything. You know, then that sponge is now saturated and it takes a bit more time, but repetition, good memory, put in the time and effort in, and in, you know, under a year you can be speaking Spanish.